Hello and welcome to Mainline Television. Radnor, Pennsylvania, Radnor Studio 21. Two of the gentlemen to my left have been guests on the show before. Hameen Diggins, and of course, you probably all remember, Andrew Howell. Andrew is the founder of Race for Peace. He's brought along his son and grandson, along with him. Hakeem is his grandson, sitting there to my right, and his son Noah. Gentlemen.
Yep.
Good afternoon,
Welcome,
John.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for taking the time. You have an event coming up.
Yes.
This Saturday, May 10th, is it?
Yes.
At the King of Prussia Mall.
Yes. 10 a.m.
And you're the founder of Race for Peace.
Yes.
I remember when you first produced that show several years ago, and you brought in a number of police persons, and you talked about your initiative for, I believe, was for the community. It had to do with race relations, youth, and police activity. But I think we're always developing a new audience. There's always a new generation coming along. So why don't you tell everyone about Race for Peace, what inspired you to do it, and how you brought your son and grandson into it.
Thanks, John.
Well, and I'm sorry. I mean, jump in anytime.
Not a
anytime
problem.
you feel, please
Yes,
jump in.
Hameen's always been my right-hand man and always helped out with the Race for Peace and gives us motivation and inspiration. But the initial step to start the Race for Peace started with my grandson. I seen the Sandra Blind incident back in 2015. I said,
Your grandson.
Hakeem.
Okay.
Hakeem Howell, 13-year-old Hakeem Howell. I looked at him and I said, what could I do to better his future, to make the relations between law enforcement and the communities better? And that was just a total inspiration. He's young, and I always told a lot of the law enforcement that we need to start with the youth. We need to really put an impact on our youth. And so far, Hakeem has been great. Hakeem, how do you feel about the Race for Peace?
I feel awesome.
How do you feel about the police department?
Great. They're like family to us.
And what my grandson just said is the truth. What I've learned in the 10 years of dealing with the law enforcement, dealing with different counties and different municipalities with the police, is that they feel just like family.
Did you approach the police departments directly?
Yes. It was a phone call, one phone call to each chief of police
From which townships?
Mighty Mike McGrath, Lower Marion Township, the cameraman, Michael Chitwood from Upper Darby Township, Tom Nolan, Tough Tom Nolan from Upper Marion Township, Wild Bill Hiccup from Radnor Township, Anthony Giamato from Tredyffrin Township, the boss, Richard Ross from the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it was about 8 or 9 chiefs.
I remember they were all here that day.
Yeah, it was eight chiefs. I used to call them the Great Eight, and that's why I all had nicknames.
And what was your approach to them?
Just like I'm talking to the audience right now, just being myself, not pretending, just being myself, letting them know that we need some type of vehicle to bring us all together. The Race for Peace is one. There's one race and we're all in it.
Is that a play on words, Race for Peace?
It is a play on word. Everybody said, what does the Race for Peace mean? The Race for Peace means preventing racism, discrimination, and violence. At one point in my life, I served as a leader in the NAACP, where I dealt with a lot of racism and a lot of discrimination. And during that time, so that was sort of like a spinoff. But the Race for Peace is remarkable. We're not color-coded. We don't look at colors. I grew up in an environment where it was multiracial. The school I went to, Samuel Powell School on 36 and Powell Avenue. So I didn't grow up hating different ethnic groups. I lived in the urban community, but I went to school with other ethnic groups down 36th Street. I grew up on 58th and Market Street from 0 to 10. But I used to go to 36 and Powell for my schooling, for my elementary school. So I didn't learn hate. I wasn't taught hate, and I didn't believe in that, and I still don't believe in it, and with the police department, it was like me singing to the choir. There was no long speech. As soon as I said what I had to say, they immediately, Andrew, say no more, we'll be there. There was no emails. There was no written agreement. There was no formal introduction. It was a phone call. So I don't know if they were even with the chief, but they say they were the chief when I called. So we're talking on the phone, Andrew, I'll be there. 2, Andrew, I'll be there. And it just went on until I had about 8 chiefs. We called them the Great 8 because these men were great to adopt the program and push the program as far as they could. And I really appreciate that. I love them all because without them, there still wouldn't be a race of peace. I may be the one who created it, but they had to approve it, they had to confirm it, and they had to have a commitment with it because I told them we had to go wholeheartedly with the race for peace. And I told them I wanted a name that would live forever. And so far, sometimes we still have racial conflicts. We still have discrimination conflicts. There's still violence. Peace stands for the violence and the race stands for racism. So, that's how I developed the name.
Race for Peace essentially has had to live through the George Floyd movement.
Yes.
You stood up against defunding the police.
Right. We're not
you
for
were
that.
not in favor of it.
Not in favor of that at all.
How was that received in your community?
Well, I always tell people, don't talk about it, be about it. Why create problems when we can create solutions? The race for peace is for everybody. We're not color coded. And with George Floyd incident, there was people on both sides of the tracks. I just so happened to be on the positive side of the tracks saying, hey, let's get together. Let's make this a more positive thing. It was a negative thing that happened. Well, how can we turn this frown upside down?
Did you lose friends?
A lot of people thought I was this, thought I was that, called the police this, called me that. But the bottom line is, John, anybody could do the race for peace. I watched The Wizard of Oz. What did you need? A brain. What did you need? A heart. And you needed some courage. So anybody could do the race for peace. They just didn't have the heart, the brain, and the courage to do it. It's not a rocket scientist movement. It's just having the heart, the courage, and the brain. And that's what I did. I stand behind my conviction as far as the finances also. We weren't 501c3 with our hands out. A lot of people offered money and stuff like that. I just didn't turn it down. I just changed the subject to prove that the race of peace can go on without finances, a low amount of finances, put it that way. So we're out here trying to do the right thing and put inside the hearts and minds of the people and our youth. This is our youth. I just talked to Joe Dales a little while ago, third in command of the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Police Department. And I told Joe, I said, hey, that's my 5-year-old son, and that's my 13-year-old grandson. And I told Joe, I said, you need to go a step better. He said, what do you mean by that, Andrew? I said, go to daycares. These little kids, 3 years old, are playing with phones. So if he's 5 and he knows about the race of peace, a 3-year-old could know about it. So I told him, we need to go take it a step down.
Have you done that?
I'm trying to do that now and get it implemented in the William Penn School District. I talked to a lot of people over there. So I'm housed over there in the Delaware Valley, and I believe that it'll really help as far as the violence within the schools.
So where does Hameen fit in to this?
Hameen has always been backup.
Well, he can speak for himself.
Yeah.
Well, he like to say I've been backup. I came from the perspective of the community. Andrew, who has had great relationships with law enforcement. Me, on the other hand, not so great. Brother being a victim of a violent act during the time. So for me,
what was that?
He was actually killed by a police officer, in Philadelphia. So for me, growing up in Philadelphia and harboring that type of pain, I was a product of my environment and trying my best to understand why and so forth. So
do you understand now why, and how old were you at the time?
At the time, I was still young. I was, just about a teenager.
How old was your brother?
So my brother was probably in the time
19.
About 19. Yeah, he was young. So he was.
Was he in the process of doing something that caused him to
It was just a crazy situation, house party situation, off-duty cop, and the cop was young, situation at a party, so forth, and things just got out of hand. So,
your brother was at a party with an off-duty cop?
Yeah, the cop just happened to be at the same party that my brother was at. And somehow things got out of hand. That cop had gotten into an incident before that, and this is during the time where you would hear the word trigger happy or so forth. So no, it was very hard for me to try to understand.
Was the cop white?
No, this was actually a African-American cop. So this wasn't even like a race thing. At the time, to be honest, John, I thought it was a blue thing. I thought that, listen, you would see different things in the community. Growing up, getting stopped for no reason, followed for no reason, so forth. That's what we seen. When Andrew gave the pitch about the race for peace, it was a time for me to actually turn around and I got questions. And when you have questions, it's going straight to the source. That's what Andrew provided was, listen, I have all these police officers from Philly through all the county. Do something with that. Being able to talk with them, to get a better understanding of what law enforcement sees and goes through on an everyday basis, but also be able to explain to them as an African American, this is what I see and this is what I go through. But how do we talk to help heal that? I've always been taught one thing. Police officers sometimes are taught a different thing. If you're not from that particular community, what do you know about that community? You only know what you may have heard, things that you may have witnessed and seen. So therefore, there needed to be a dual understanding where the police officers were able to understand the community and the community were able to understand the point that law enforcement was coming from also, because at the end of the day, what I realized even through the race for peace was everybody just wants to go home.
Yeah.
They want to get home safely. They want to get back to their families because nobody sleeps in their uniform. But if one person does something bad, do you blame everybody? And sometimes that does happen. On the part of law enforcement, it could be something traumatic that may have happened to a partner. You still walk around with that pain. In the community, if something happened to a friend or a family member, you still walk around with that pain. Without the conversation, you're walking around distrusting everybody that appears to look like the person that caused you pain.
How did you reach that point of understanding that you just explained to me now? Did you go through counseling? Was it just a growth? Did you ask questions? I kind of think you asked questions.
Yeah, so it was...
How did your family feel when you lost your brother?
There was a lot of pain, especially coming from a Islamic, family. It was a lot of pain. Trying to understand that because, growing up in the community that I grew up in, sometimes death is normalized. Another African-American man is now dead. But in that case, this was my brother, so it became very difficult. As I began to get a little bit older and began to understand, and like I said, be put in a situation where it's like all of these questions I've had over the years, I can now look someone in the eye and ask a question. But then I found out that some of these people that I grew up, and I'm going to say dislike, it changed. Because these are guys, they didn't know my brother. They weren't there. But I had to change my mindset of, well, you're still law enforcement. So it had to be you.
Right.
But it was not the case. As I began to know these guys, as they began to be open to conversations, yes, we do need to go to the community and find out who they are.
What happened to the? So there was an incident, and then what? Did somebody pull out a firearm and shot your brother?
Yeah, it got out of hand.
And they were both at the same party.
They were both at the same party. The cop was off duty, and he wanted to party with everyone else, whatever. He was, like I said, still young, and things in the party getting out of hand. And there's a lot of different stories. My brother tried to, protect a female from the cop and, from the law enforcement officer. But like I said, he was off duty. But one thing turned into another, and you're talking about what, the 80s?
80s.
Where times were
89.
Yeah, 89. So times were different. So at that time, and I want to say he was almost fresh to the force. So going from the street to law enforcement at that time, a lot of people couldn't separate job from
What happened to him?
desk duty. We thought that it wasn't fair that it didn't go beyond that. But being a kid at that point, there was nothing that I could have done. Like I said, right before the shooting of my brother, he was in a different incident, but I had to look at it because it wasn't a race thing. Like, this is somebody in a uniform. Like I said, I thought blue, not black and white, but I'm looking like, wow, like, to be honest, this is one gang. That's the way that I thought. The way that I grew up, it was almost a thing to grow up with distrust. That's the thing. Why are we being followed? Why are they treating us like that? But the lack of understanding is what I began to realize, wait a minute, if we don't talk, and I can't tell you about my world, and I know nothing about your world, how do you begin to heal? Being part of the Race for Peace and seeing law enforcement sit on a panel. We had pastors and
community
activists, everybody on the panel. And when I tell you no holds barred, people ask the hard questions. But I've seen officers stand up and say, your kid's being followed? Listen, take my card. I'm going to look into that. I'm like, wow, wait a minute. I started to see things differently. Like, did he just say, contact him? He'll jump right on it. He'll make a phone call. And I begin to see that these are still individuals that are doing a job. So I begin to have respect, but I begin to understand that I could not hold one person accountable for what happened to my brother and say, listen, it's all of you. Just like in my neighborhood, I would feel offended if, so this one person did something and now you're holding all of us accountable for what happened from one kid. We're all being judged in one big bubble. So it wasn't fair for me to sit up there and say, wait a minute, I don't like people in blue or law enforcement, because then on the other hand, I have a cousin that's law enforcement.
You do?
Yes,
Yeah.
that happened to work in the same district as the officer that killed my brother. So my thing was,
Is he still a patrolman? The person that killed your brother? Or did he retire?
They got rid of him.
No, they got rid. He's gone. Over the years, it just kind of faded. Don't know what happened, but they got rid of him. But I began to realize that to hate law enforcement, do I put my cousin in that bubble? It don't make sense, because I know my cousin. I love my cousin. He just happens to wear a uniform, but I know that he's out in the community. He's out patrolling, and I worry about him coming home safe. So that's when the realization of changing my mindset. We've had basketball games that, we have collaborated with, and we had law enforcement play basketball with the young people. No uniform, but they got skills. But to see young people give the half a hug, to sit up there and be like, oh man, you got skills. But were they not supposed to have basketball skills because they were law enforcement? But to see that it kind of humanized the officers. It kind of showed like, I'm just like you. Because before I had this job, I might have went to your school. I might have grew up in your neighborhood. So that's where, like I said, over the years, my understanding, my education of law enforcement began to change. Like I said, it may have been a different experience than Andrew's, but at the same time, it was an experience that I was able to get a better understanding from the Race for Peace, being around these guys, eating donuts, drinking coffee, hanging out. But for them to even sympathize and be like, man, listen, I'm sorry that happened to your family. But it humanized everything for me, to see them want to come into neighborhoods that they weren't even used to.
Do you think that there's always been a fracture in the communities and with the police? There's always been a separation.
I
think that it's always been. I think some of that is historic.
And that's what we're trying to change because it's a bad taste in your mouth. And you have a bad taste in your mouth, it's hard to get that out. You got to eat peppermint, you got to do this, you got to do that. So the race of peace is part of that, part of trying to get that bad taste out of your mouth, that historical, hundreds of years of the same thing.
Yeah.
How do you get the bad taste out of someone's mouth or their heart or their mind? Because you're coming across as an African American man, and you must come across members of the community that doesn't matter what you say, they don't believe you. They don't trust the police. They don't trust the law enforcement. They don't trust anything. How do you try to persuade them to be different? Because I'm going to reflect back on the youth. So that's where it has to start.
Yeah.
Because you may not be able to be fixed, but your son and grandson may have a chance for better understanding.
Well, what Hameen has just said and what you just said is absolutely true. His mindset was different from the incident. And what you just said about changing the mindset of the future generation, we can change that. I may be one way, he may be one way, you may be one way, but we can change these guys. We got a little molding to do a little bit, but so far, Hakeem, how do you feel about the police?
I feel awesome with them.
Why?
Because I will always work with them, like in the other events, like the King of Prussia Mall, the ice skating, and the Halloween event, and the Bridgeport Night Out. Yeah, and that's why I always be in the news with them, and they help us out. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Noah, what about you, Noah?
Noah,
Everybody's
how you
looking
feel
at you.
about the police?
Noah's not going to be talking to anyone.
But that's understandable.
He's a guest.
Right. But we know that we were able to bring the law enforcement to the community.
Right. Well,
Instead of waiting. So, we did that out of uniform, not just in uniform, but
we
out
took
of
them
uniform.
out of their comfort zone. Like Hameen has mentioned about the Claire Muhammads, they weren't used to taking their shoes off to go to the masjid. That was a big thing. You got 50 cops out there, and we say, hey, you got to take your shoes off. So it's a dual education. It's a dual education, and I love it. I want more of it. And I just like to see all of us together. We don't have to do the color code thing. We don't have to do this color matters, that color matters. We all matter, and it's just, I'm tired of being sick and tired of the nonsense.
I fully understand. Truthfully, as a much younger guy, I had a friend. His name was John Ricciutti, and he was at a bar called Smokey Joe's, and I forget. It's around University of Penn.
40th and Walnut.
Yeah, and he was at a bar there, and there was an off-duty policeman, and there was a confrontation in the bar, and he went outside. He left. He left with another guy, and the off-duty policeman followed and shot him in the heart. And we all knew at the time, just exactly the way you feel, nothing was going to happen, and nothing did happen. So, and the reason I say that, it's because it had nothing to do with race, because both my friend was an Italian, and the guy that shot him was Italian. I mean, that was just coincidental. He was just an off-duty cop. But we all knew. I was like 22 years old at the time. I said, this had nothing to do with color. It had to do with this is what they're circle the wagons, And there's the police really. I think it's house cleaning, but they need to get rid of the bad guys, the guys that go in there with the wrong intentions. Well, I think I would really truthfully urge you to talk to Kevin Bethel, because I interviewed him.
Yes,
and he's really he wants to see the mindset of police the way you and Hameen imagine it. He's actually has a training program for police officers to be able to better recognize people that are on the spectrum, that are autistic, that may have been viewed as being mentally ill, and round them up and do whatever you got to do, and that's a whole different perspective that's changed, and that came out of some things that needed to be done, you know.
It was an incident on 61st and Locust. That's what happened, and they killed the guy on 61st and Locust, and he had mental issues.
But if the law enforcement connects with the community, see, in the community, and you should know this, we know people on the spectrum. We know, that person, they don't mean no harm. Mm-hmm. They may look belligerent. They may be looking like they're kind of out of touch, but we know them. They're not going to hurt you. But law enforcement may not know that.
Right.
Because there's no connection between the block captain or whatever and law enforcement. There's no connection between the community that says, listen, if you see him, whatever, reach out to somebody first if you're unsure. So therefore, somebody that's enraged out of confusion can look like, are they on something? What's going on? This is where the training needs to come in, that you come and you let people from the community, activists, so forth, sit down and say, listen, let me educate you on where I'm from so that we can avoid any future mistake that may happen. This is where if we don't work together, then we will be going backwards to a time where I don't trust you, you don't trust me, we're just gonna go about our business. We have to change that. Some is law enforcement fault, some is our fault. We both have to take responsibility in order to make a change. And that's why when you're racing for peace, yes, it is an urgent thing. Because if we believe that we can get there, we can. But if we give up, we turn a blind eye, there's a problem. Even people in law enforcement. If I know morally what you're doing is wrong, I have to make a decision. Is it just about my paycheck? Or is it about, I know you're doing something wrong, I need to speak up because morally, I can't stand for that. Same thing in the community. Morally, I can't sit up here and watch you destroy where I'm from. I gotta say something.
What are your feelings about, I think that there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a lot of violence with youth in your community over social media, things that go on, the texting.
I think I know where you're going with this, John. And what happens is, I was told by elders, grandmoms, uncles, an idle mind is a terrible thing. And when they're closing the libraries, they're closing the programs, they're closing this down. They don't have this anymore. They don't have that anymore. This is what you have. So they replaced it with what? Futuristic stuff. Like you said, the social media, this, that, and the other. They could have other things. They could have trade schools. They could have things that's still physical. Trade is physical, and you work in your mind and your muscle. It's a lot of different things they could have, John, that could take these kids and take the youth to a different direction.
Where do your son and your grandson fit on not just education, but trade school?
My son, I'm glad you mentioned that. I have a son that went to the Job Corps. He's 20 years old. He has his own place, makes $48 an hour, took up carpentry and maintenance trades. I mean, this guy's.
Did he
it's
went to a
phenomenal.
school outside of?
Right, it's called Job Corps. So it's a trade school. He graduated from school, excellent in school. Maybe he's seen a little bit of me because I'm general contractor, and I used to work him. I'm a workaholic. You know, I had perfect attendance when I was at the township, 5 straight years of perfect attendance. So I'm a workaholic. And I told him, I said, well, Justice, you can go to college. You can do the doctor, you can do the lawyer. But what if not? What are you going to do? And I said, I told him to take up carpentry. I told him to take up plumbing. I told him to take up welding.
Your son?
Yes. And you think they're not listening to you playing a video game while you're talking to them and they're distracted. And what does he do? Same exact thing as I told him.
Yeah. You don't see that there's a connection with social media intimidation, which is what I call it.
Well, it's
Somebody's
called
talking to
cyberbullying.
somebody's girlfriend. People just don't randomly shoot people on the street. It's usually generated by some interaction that people had in that group.
Well, then that's the responsibility of people who are owning these networks.
Love you, cuz, but wait. Social media, it's a good and a bad thing in a way. It depends on how you look at it.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, you know, you can put out a product, whatever. It's your job to market it, to make sure that it's popular, so forth. Teaching young people the correct way to use this technology, because this is not our era. These kids are growing up in an era where they're born with technology.
Yep.
You know, so a tablet, a phone, so forth. The thing is, if you teach them how to use it correctly, it can go a long way, because we're not going to go backwards as a society. We're going forward, which means more technology is going to be able to come out. But if I can help reprogram you and show you a different side of technology and how to use it, which that's one of the things, you know, we partner with Race for Peace, but Urban Navigation does, you know that. You know.
Who does?
Urban Navigation, that's a nonprofit that has partnered with Race for Peace, that me and my partner, Donald Jackson, that we have, where we deal with a lot of the youth as far as energy, as far as building electric bikes, as far as getting them ready and prepared mentally for trade schools. And, you know, during our basketball games that we've had where we linked up and had law enforcement as part of it, resource tables to say, listen, what are you interested in? You know, we even have a book club, which is the Cool Guys Reading Club, where getting these kids to get back to picking up a book. You know, because in that book is a lot of knowledge. It doesn't mean that their technology is bad, but it becomes, let's take a break from that. Let's take a walk. Let me show you just how to use this technology. We see everybody riding around with the electric scooters,
right,
the bicycles, whatever, you know, which is actually kind of green. It helps, you know, with a lot of stuff. But as long as we leave it in their hands to figure out how to use it, yes, the cyberbullying is going to keep happening because we don't teach etiquette as far as technology. This is what you do not put on there. If you go for a job and someone says, okay, you seem very intelligent. Let me look up your social media, John. Why are you on social media with a bunch of money and guns and so forth? Should you hire that person? Now they can say, I'm just playing.
And there's a lot of hate on social media right now.
It's a lot, because I may assume that if you even have prop money, I can assume that that's your real money. And if I'm a person that does not have, and we post everything on social media. I'm about to go on vacation. I'm about to eat my dinner. What do you think happens if, in the midst of me just playing pretend, I'm going to say that, I think that you really have this money. You really are the shooter. You know, because that's the image.
Talk a little bit about yourself and what you professionally do.
So professionally, I'm a nurse, but I'm also
An RN?
LPN. So I am a business owner. I have a upscale clothing store, but I also run. I'm a part of two nonprofits. One of them I'm the co-founder of, which is Urban Navigation, and I'm part of another organization which is called Men of Action, Brothers of Faith, that goes throughout Delaware County. So we deal with a lot of the young people and community as far as feeding people.
You live in Delaware County?
And I live in Delaware County, yes. Grew up in Philadelphia, but I live in lovely Lansdowne, PA. Shout out to all my people in Lansdowne, PA. So we teach kids everything from culinary. We have a spot over in Philadelphia that my sister's a chef at. So kids that are interested in culinary, we take them through a place, it's called The Lynn, around Ridge Avenue, 1608. Where these kids can go, they can learn videography. There's a studio downstairs. They can learn photography. There's poetry night. There's a jazz night. And all of the things that they're interested at, because we meet them where they're at. But this helps get them out of the house, off of the electronics. But it's fun to them, to show them, like, listen, I know you're in front of the camera taking a selfie, but let me show you how to do photography the correct way. I know you want to video everything, whatever, but let me show you what really happens behind the camera. So we take what they love, we just reteach it to them in a way where there is older people seasoned like us that can say, let me show you the right thing. When you go to get a job, you don't want this on your social media.
Yeah, you don't want anybody to pick up anything that any of your social media activity.
But if they're not taught, who do we blame? I can't blame, these companies, the social media, whatever, but I can't blame the kid either. But we have to have a duty to make sure that we explain, listen, man, your profile's public. So when you go out here and, you posting this stuff, but I'm just playing. I'm not a real killer. I'm not a real thief. I'm not a real whatever. But on social media, we know that you can pretend to be anything you want.
Where would you like to see Race for Peace go?
I'd like to see Race for Peace all over the country. One municipality picked it up real strong, which is Philadelphia, picked up our mission statement. We will unite and stand together as one, is our Race for Peace. We will unite together and stand as one Philadelphia, even holding the finger up. So people have imitated, duplicated, copied, the Race for Peace mission statement and what we're about and what we're doing for the past 8-9 years. So it doesn't surprise me. And I remember when me and Mike sat down, he said, what do you think about that, Andrew? I said, well, that's what I want to happen. That's what I want to happen. I want them to imitate, duplicate, and do what we're doing. So I like to see the Race for Peace all over the place,
Did you basically really just start Race for Peace primarily for your son and your grandson, and for anybody else's son and grandson?
Well,
was that your driving force?
That was a driving force, John. But like I always say, if it only takes one. If I could just change him, he could change somebody else. If I could only change him, he could change somebody else, and it just go on and go on and so on.
Right.
We're all in the race. You see the emblem, passing the baton. So you may have started it, but somebody else is going to finish it. So it's a relay.
What would you like your legacy to be?
You're looking at it.
Okay. Hameen?
Well, just that an understanding between everybody, an understanding between law enforcement, community, a way to work together to move society forward, but talking to the young people that actually listening, finding out what they want, what we can do for them. Because once again, this is not our era. So we can't base it on what happened to us in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. This is a whole different era. We have to respect their train of thought and see how we can help them and move forward from there.
It's a bright future for all of us if we all just come together as one.
Hakeem? Mm-hmm. Go ahead. It's your turn. I don't want you to think you've been ignored the whole day, but your dad and your grandfather, I'm sorry, and Hameen have, spoken pretty well about the initiative of Race for Peace.
Yeah.
Where do you go to school?
I go to Penwood Middle School.
And do you have favorite subjects?
Art, definitely.
Art.
Yeah.
Art takes on many forms. Art, writing art, or acting, or
Painting art, like genre.
painting?
Yeah.
that's what your favorite thing is to do. Do you
Yeah.
paint well?
Yep, I paint very well.
Do you really? You speak well.
Definitely.
You definitely know you speak well. That's a good sign that you have a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
Yes. Are there any particular things that you like to paint?
Well, my favorite movie, I like Minions. Like, I got some toys of them. And I watched
You said was your favorite movie?
Despicable Me 4 is the new one.
I don't. I don't know anything about movies that young guys and girls watch. None. No, I only know. I'm old, so they would only be old movies that I would know. How about, do you have a favorite? Do you have? Well, you said something about the movies. What do you get painting images and ideas from that?
Yeah, definitely.
You do?
Yeah.
So what would describe one for me? Because like pretend I'm 2 years old,
Yeah.
and you want to tell me about the movie. What would you tell me about?
Imagine of drawing a minion that is in a big,
A minion?
yeah,
Okay,
in a big lab, like a big house.
like a castle?
Yeah,
No,
sort of
or a
like
big
that.
house.
Yeah, a big house, like a tall house.
Okay.
With a big truck, and having a pet dog on a sunny day. Yeah.
I can't imagine any of that. Well, wait a minute. I would about the pet dog. I would like. Tell me about the pet dog. What kind of dog? I like dachshunds. You didn't ask me, but I'm telling you.
Well, I like,
What kind of dog would be in it?
let's say, a Labrador.
Okay.
Yeah.
What, chocolate, Chesapeake?
Yeah, chocolate.
Okay. Okay. You were looking up. You were looking up at the ceiling. Were you thinking?
Yeah, I was thinking.
What were you thinking about?
I was thinking how many dogs should be colored like that's a Labrador color. Like there's lots of them. Yeah, that's how I think. Like I look up in the ceiling and I think in my head how many things I can name a Labrador or be colors of that dog. Like there's a lot of dogs I have.
You do?
Yeah,
Do you have more than one dog?
maybe.
What, in your mind or?
In my mind.
Oh, that's cool. Did you sell any of your artwork yet?
No, not yet.
You think on having an art show?
Yeah, I was thinking about having an art show.
Where would you have it?
Like in school. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to ask Noah questions, but I don't think Noah's going to answer any questions. Anything you want to tell me? No. Well, he's shy, but you're not though. Are there any other subjects that you like besides art?
No, art is my favorite subject. It's all the subjects.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's
so
it.
You would just go to art all day.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to art school when you get older?
Yeah.
You're a great guy.
Definitely.
You're a great guy to talk to. You're going to do well.
Thanks. Yeah, thank
well.
you.
I want him to draw the emblem. I want him to make the new logo.
Oh. You want to change your logo?
That's the new logo right there.
It is?
That's right.
I can't tell.
Here.
Okay. I mean, it's neat. It's a neat shirt. I noticed you didn't bring me one.
You had about 5 of them, John.
I need one now. Anyway, with Hakeem, Noah, Hameen, and Andrew, and thanks to our producer director Kevin. This is John Ricciutti from Mainline TV, and thanks for checking us out. And have a
Thanks,
good day.
John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.